Every sacred tradition on this planet once pointed in the same direction: the temples of the Nile Valley, the cave monasteries carved into Himalayan cliffs, the forest ashrams of Tamil Nadu, the mystery schools of Greece and Alexandria, separated by thousands of miles, separated by thousands of years. And yet when you strip away the cultural clothing, the symbolic language, the ritual forms that accumulated over centuries, they all pointed the same way, inward, every single one. Religion once meant something different than it does now. The word itself comes from a root meaning to bind back, to reconnect. Reconnect to what? To the source that was never actually separate, to the consciousness that appears as individual form while remaining undivided. The original practitioners knew this from direct experience. Their temples were consciousness technology. Their practices were designed to exhaust the seeking mind until seeing dawned. What I am laying out tonight traces this thread across civilizations. You will see the same instruction appearing in completely unconnected lineages. You will understand how that instruction got corrupted into something external, something you had to earn through behavior or receive from intermediaries. And toward the end, I will walk you through exactly what the original teachers were pointing toward, a direct experience you can verify tonight. Hang tight for that practical section. We always present quality, so just wait for it. This goes further than comparative religion. Anyone can note surface similarities between traditions. What matters is understanding the mechanism, the actual process these traditions were describing. When you understand the mechanism, you can test it tonight. No belief required, no conversion to any system, just the willingness to look where every authentic teaching has always pointed. To keep this accessible, I will translate technical terms into English throughout. When I reference concepts from these lineages, I will use plain language that preserves the precision without creating barriers. The original words matter for those who want to study further. For at least 30,000 years, human beings have transmitted understanding about consciousness through oral lineages. The written records we have, the texts scholars can date, represent a fraction of what existed. Pyramid texts carved in stone had circulated for millennia through initiated chains of transmission before anyone wrote them down. The earliest Vajrayana tantras were oral teaching long before practitioners committed them to text. The people who carried these teachings, the melanated populations who first developed civilization along the Nile, in the Indus Valley, across the ancient Tamil lands, possessed sophisticated maps of consciousness that modern researchers are only beginning to verify. They understood energy systems in the body that Western medicine dismissed as superstition, until brain imaging and electromagnetic field detection started confirming what yogis had described for thousands of years. When you examine what these traditions actually taught, stripped of later additions and institutional distortions, the convergence becomes undeniable. In the Kemetic tradition, the goal was becoming what they called the illuminated spirit, seeing your identity with the divine. The Parayansi, the house of life where priests trained, taught a complete science of consciousness transformation. They mapped 9 components of the human being: the physical vessel, the vital double, the personality essence, the heart consciousness, the shadow, the name, the power, the spiritual form, and the luminous spirit. The famous phrase, "Know thyself," inscribed at Delphi came from this Egyptian lineage, from Tehuti's original teaching that self-knowledge and divine knowledge are identical. The Shabaka stone records how the Memphite priests understood creation itself. Pa-Ti thinks the world with perception, speaks it with authoritative utterance, activates it with vital force. Perception, speech, and power, 3 aspects of one creative consciousness. The same consciousness that creates worlds is the consciousness looking through your eyes right now. That was the teaching. In the Vajrayana traditions that flowered in Tibet, the goal was seeing natural awareness, the knowing presence that has always been present, never stained by the content appearing within it. Saraha, the arrow maker who achieved full realization while working with his hands, wrote spontaneous songs about this seeing. The one watching the hands and the hands moving, same thing. Separation was only apparent. Tilopa transmitted to Naropa, Naropa to Marpa, Marpa to Milarepa, an unbroken chain carrying the same pointing. You are already what you seek. The search obscures what was never lost. Direct seeing ends what was always an imaginary problem. In Kashmir Shaivism, Somananda wrote the Shivadrishti, the vision of the divine, where the core insight truly began. You do not become enlightened. You realize you already were. His student Atpaladeva developed this further in his text on divine recognition. The moment consciousness realizes it was never separate from the source, never limited, even while appearing limited. Kashamaraja later distilled this into 20 sutras in the heart of recognition. The first sutra says it plainly: consciousness by its own free will causes everything to appear. Consciousness is the creation while being the creator. The practitioner's job is seeing what was always the case. The 18 Siddhars of Tamil Nadu taught the same principle through different vocabulary. Thirumular's Tarumantaram, 3,000 verses covering the complete science of yoga and liberation, makes this explicit. The temple we seek is the body we already occupy. The God we seek is the awareness we already are. Sivavakyar's fierce poetry attacked every form of external searching. Why wander temple to temple when the divine sits within your own form? Different words, different cultural containers, different ritual forms that developed over time. Same fundamental pointing. Turn inward. What you seek is what is seeking. The divine you imagine somewhere else is present here, now, as the very awareness registering these words. Are you with me so far? If this is landing, if something in this pointing feels like it matters, drop a comment about what's connecting for you. So if every authentic tradition pointed inward, toward self-knowing, toward consciousness seeing itself, how did we end up with religions demanding external worship, promising rewards after death, requiring intermediaries between the human and the divine? The corruption followed a predictable pattern. The original teaching was always direct. A realized teacher would transmit understanding to prepared students through pointing, through paradox, through practices designed to exhaust the seeking mind until seeing dawned. The transmission was intimate, personal, calibrated to the specific blocks each student carried. Mass instruction does address the particular way each mind has contracted around false identity. As these teachers passed, students who had received partial transmission faced a problem. How do you teach what you have only glimpsed? How do you point where you have partially seen? The answer across every tradition was codification, writing down what the teacher said, creating systems of practice, building structures to preserve what seemed in danger of being lost. Preservation mattered. Something shifted in the process. The finger pointing at the moon became the focus instead of the moon itself. The practices designed to exhaust seeking became rituals performed for their own sake. The temporary structures built to support seeing became permanent institutions requiring loyalty. What happens next is predictable human psychology. Power concentrates. Hierarchies form. Those at the top of hierarchies have incentive to maintain their position. And the most effective way to maintain position is convincing people they need intermediaries. That truth comes through authorized channels or fails to come at all. The inward pointing gets replaced with outward worship. The goal of self-seeing gets replaced with pleasing an external deity. The liberation available now gets postponed to afterlife rewards. And suddenly what was technology for awakening becomes technology for social control. Think about what I just said. Sit with that for a moment. The same teachings designed to liberate became the tools of control once institutions took hold of them. This happened in the Kemetic tradition when temple mysteries meant to guide, seeing became political tools for maintaining pharaonic power. It happened in Christianity when the Gnostic teachings of direct knowing were systematically suppressed in favor of hierarchical church authority. It happened in the Hindu traditions when what were originally stages of spiritual development rigidified into inherited social positions. It happened wherever human institutions touched what was meant to remain living transmission. The pattern is identical across every tradition that became institutional religion. First, the teaching gets literalized. Metaphors become historical claims. Stories designed to illustrate consciousness become stories about external events that must be believed. The inner meaning gets replaced with outer requirement. Second, the access gets gate-kept. You need priests. You need authorization. You need to belong to the right group, perform the right rituals, hold the right beliefs. Direct access to the divine becomes heresy, something dangerous that must be controlled. Third, the goal gets externalized. Heaven becomes a place you go after death rather than realization available now. God becomes a being somewhere else rather than the consciousness that is your own presence. Salvation becomes something granted from outside rather than seeing of what was never lost. What is remarkable is that the original teaching never completely disappeared. In every tradition, mystics kept emerging who saw through the institutional overlay and returned to direct pointing. the Sufi poets within Islam, the Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart, the Kabbalists within Judaism, the Chan and Zen masters who refused to let Buddhism become mere philosophy, the tantric lineages that preserve direct transmission even as mainstream religion became externalized worship. These mystics often faced persecution from the very institutions claiming to represent their traditions. The mystic's message threatens institutional power. If you can access the divine directly, what do you need the institution for? If liberation is available now, through direct seeing, why pay dues for lifetime membership in organizations promising future reward? Understanding the corruption helps. What matters more is understanding what the original teaching actually pointed toward. That pointing remains available. The corruption obscured it behind layers of institutional distortion, yet never destroyed it. Every authentic mystical tradition maps the human being as more than physical body alone, and the maps are remarkably consistent across unconnected lineages. The body you see in the mirror, the flesh and bone and blood, represents one layer. This is what Kemetic tradition called the cot, what Vedic tradition called the food sheath, what every system recognizes as the material expression. It is real, it is present, and you are more than it. Animating this body is what traditions call the soul, the individual essence that carries through time. Personality lives here. Memory accumulates here. Karma, the patterning created through past action, stores itself here. The soul is also real, also present, and you are more than it. Beyond the soul is what traditions call spirit, that which connects directly to source. Spirit carries no personal history the way soul does. Experience shapes personality. Spirit remains untouched by shaping. Spirit is the thread connecting individual expression back to universal presence, the aspect of you that was never born and cannot die. Spirit is also real, also present, and yet something is aware even of spirit. This is the crucial distinction that separates mystical teaching from religious teaching. Right here, pay attention to this. Religion stops at the level of spirit or soul. It treats spirit as the highest aspect, the thing that returns to God, the eternal component that survives death. And that framing maintains duality. My spirit relating to God's spirit, the individual returning to the whole. Relationship between separate things, even if those separate things are eternal. Mystical teaching goes one step further. It points to the witnessing presence in which body, soul, and spirit all appear. The knowing that knows the body, that knows the soul, that knows the spirit, and that remains a subject of all knowing, never becoming object. This is the true trinity that the outer teaching encodes yet rarely reveals. Body, soul, spirit, and the consciousness in which all three appear. The Father beyond form, the Son as individuated expression, the Holy Spirit as connecting principle, and the presence in which this entire pattern becomes known. Every authentic mystical school points here, to the knowing prior to its content, to the consciousness that remains subject while making objects appear, to what the Dzogchen tradition calls the natural state, and what Kashmir Shaivism calls universal consciousness seeing itself. The corruption made people worship the Trinity instead of realizing they are the presence in which the Trinity pattern appears. It made people pray to the levels instead of seeing what is aware of all levels. It preserved the map while hiding the territory the map describes. There is a distinction worth understanding between paths that point toward this seeing, because the methods differ even when the goal is identical. We are going to get practical with this shortly, so bear with us. What is commonly called yoga, the classical path described in ancient texts, works primarily through withdrawal. The practitioner systematically pulls attention away from external objects, away from body sensation, away from mental activity, until what remains is pure knowing without content. This is the path of transcendence, rising above the world to see what was always beyond it. What is called tantra operates differently. Instead of withdrawal from experience, tantra uses experience as doorway. Every sensation becomes fuel. Every perception reveals the consciousness that perceives. Everything is embraced because everything appears within the knowing presence. This is the path of transformation, discovering the divine within rather than beyond the world. The goal is identical. Consciousness seeing itself. Self-liberation through direct perception. The vehicle differs, and the vehicle determines what becomes available along the way. Classical yoga tends toward renunciation. If the world is distraction, minimize engagement with it. If sensation pulls attention outward, still the senses. If relationship creates attachment, transcend relationship. The practitioner becomes expert at disengagement, at stepping back from experience into the witnessing position. Tantra tends toward engagement. If consciousness is present in all experience, any experience can reveal it. If energy is just consciousness in motion, work with energy directly. If relationship is where conditioning surfaces, use relationship as mirror. The practitioner becomes expert at transformation, at using whatever appears as fuel for seeing. Sukhasiddhi, a woman who achieved full realization at 61 years old, represents what the tantric path makes possible. Luipa found awakening eating fish guts that fishermen threw away, consuming what others rejected, transforming apparent impurity into path. Manipadra achieved perfection while maintaining ordinary life, family, and work. Existence itself becomes the practice ground. Both paths have produced fully realized beings. Both paths have also produced their characteristic distortions. The yoga path distortion is spiritual bypassing, using transcendence to avoid dealing with unresolved psychological material, mistaking dissociation for liberation, believing yourself beyond the world while unconscious patterns continue running your life. The meditator who can access bliss states yet falls apart when life challenges arise. The Tantra path distortion is spiritual materialism, using sacred practices to inflate rather than dissolve the ego, pursuing experiences and powers instead of seeing, getting lost in the fuel and forgetting what the fuel was meant to burn. The practitioner who accumulates impressive experiences yet never arrives at what experiences appear within. The traditions that maintained living transmission knew these distortions well. Authentic Tantra requires teacher relationship, requires guidance from someone who can see where you are actually stuck rather than where you think you are stuck. And authentic yoga includes moral preparation, ethical grounding that prevents transcendence from becoming escape. The Isha lineage integrates both orientations. The Shambhavi practice works with energy directly, tantric in its engagement with life force, while the fundamental teaching points toward the consciousness that witnesses all energy movement. What they call the Tantra Kriya path combines transformation and transcendence, using the body as instrument while pointing beyond what the body can contain. This integration matters because modern seekers often unconsciously mix approaches without understanding the logic of either. They try tantric engagement while carrying yogic attitudes of rejection, or they attempt yogic withdrawal while secretly hoping for tantric powers. The result is confusion, oscillation between approaches, progress in neither direction. Understanding what you are actually doing and why, this is where real progress becomes possible. If this is clicking, if something in this framework is clarifying your own path, let me know in the comments what is landing for you. Now we come to how belief actually functions. The shift from direct pointing to external religion was institutional corruption, and it also reflects something about how human consciousness operates with beliefs. A belief is a mental model that shapes perception. You see reality filtered through the models you hold about what reality is. The brain receives overwhelming information and uses beliefs to organize, to prioritize, to make sense of the flood. The question becomes, which beliefs? If you believe consciousness is produced by brain tissue, you will perceive yourself as a physical being having occasional spiritual experiences. If you believe consciousness is fundamental and brain tissue appears within it, you will perceive yourself as presence temporarily wearing physical form. The evidence you notice, the experiences you pay attention to, the meaning you derive from life, all filtered through the base assumption. The original teachings offered precise beliefs as temporary scaffolding. Beliefs that would gradually dissolve the belief maker itself. Beliefs that pointed toward their own transcendence. You were given a model that would eventually reveal all models as models, including itself. The corrupted teachings offered beliefs as permanent truth. Beliefs that required defense against competing beliefs. Beliefs that created identity, belonging to the group that held the correct beliefs, opposing the groups that held incorrect ones. Instead of dissolving the believer, these beliefs reinforced it. Instead of pointing beyond themselves, they became ends in themselves. The mystical traditions insisted on direct experience for this reason. Belief about the divine differs from knowledge of the divine. Reading the menu differs from eating the meal. Studying the map differs from walking the territory. At some point, the belief must be verified through direct seeing, or it remains just another mental formation, another object in consciousness mistaken for consciousness itself. The teachings I am sharing tonight function as mental models. I am offering you frameworks, distinctions, ways of organizing your understanding. Use them as pointers, as fingers indicating where to look, and then look. If the model is accurate, looking will verify it. If the model serves its purpose, it will dissolve when you see what it was pointing toward. If the model is just another thing to believe, you will know because it will feel like accumulation rather than liberation, like adding weight rather than setting down burden. This brings us to the practical dimension. Understanding that all traditions pointed inward is interesting. Understanding how the corruption happened is useful. What matters is whether you can access what they were pointing toward. The direction is simple to state. Turn attention toward that which is aware. Instead of attending to objects of knowing, attend to the knowing itself. Instead of looking at the content of experience, look at what experiences the content. Attention has been trained to look outward. From the moment of birth, you learn to attend to objects, people, situations, threats, opportunities. Survival required external attention. The inward turn was never trained. Finding the one who sees rather than focusing on what is seen, this possibility was never demonstrated. The practice traditions developed countless methods for this reversal of attention. Self-inquiry, asking who am I, and following the question to its source. Witnessing, cultivating the position of observer rather than participant. Meditation on the knowing presence itself, using formless presence as the focus until subject-object division collapses. All different entry points to the same seeing. What I am offering here is direct pointing that requires no extensive preparation. You can taste what you are before you stabilize as what you are, and that taste often motivates the deeper work that follows. If you are driving or in a situation requiring external attention, come back to this section later. If you can be fully present, let us begin. Find a position where your body can be relatively still. Sitting works well. Lying down works if you can stay alert. The position matters less than the quality of attention you bring. Allow eyes to close or soften. Gaze lowered if remaining open. Feel the body sitting or lying. Feel the points of contact with whatever supports you. Feel the weight settling downward through gravity. Notice the breath happening. Simply notice it. The way you might notice weather outside a window. Breath enters. Breath exits. Notice the body breathing. Now, while continuing to notice body and breath, become aware that noticing is occurring. There is body. There is breath. And there is awareness of body and breath. Let attention shift from what is known notice to what is noticing. You are looking for the looker. Attending to what attends. Seeking the seeker. When you turn attention this way, thoughts may arise. I cannot find anything. This is confusing. Am I doing it right? Notice these thoughts appear in the knowing presence. They are content of presence. Objects appearing and disappearing. What you are looking for is what sees the thoughts appearing. Notice that you cannot find presence as an object. You find presence without form, without location, without boundary. And yet it is undeniably here. The absence of findable object is success. You are seeing that which cannot be pointed to because it is what does all pointing. Rest in this seeing. No need to do anything with it. No need to intensify it or develop it. Simply rest as knowing aware of itself. Notice that this witnessing presence has no personal qualities. It carries no sadness, no happiness, no success, no failure, no good, no bad. These qualities belong to content appearing within presence. Presence itself is like clear space. untouched by what appears within it. Notice that this witnessing presence has no age. The body that sits here has a particular age. The personality that accumulated over years has history. The presence itself, can you find an age in it? Is the knowing present now different from knowing present 5 years ago, 20 years ago, when you were very young? The content of knowing has changed radically. You do have the same thoughts, the same beliefs, the same body chemistry you had as a child. The knowing itself, the fact of being aware, has that changed? Or is it the same knowing now registering adult experience rather than child experience? This is what every tradition pointed toward. This that has been constant through every change. This that will be present at death, aware of dying, just as it is present now, aware of living. This that appears personal because it knows personal experience yet has no personal qualities of its own. Rest as this. Nothing to achieve here. You are seeing what has always been the case. You are presence. You always have been. The appearance of being something else, of being body or mind or personality, was always just appearance within you. Stay with this recognition for as long as feels natural. When you are ready, let attention expand to include body again. Include sounds in the environment. Include the room you are in. Presence remains. It has always remained. Now you are simply more conscious that it remains. Gently, In your own time, let eyes open if they were closed. Return to ordinary perception while carrying this seeing with you. What you just experienced, however briefly, however subtly, is what every mystic in every tradition points toward. The experience itself may seem small, ordinary, nothing special. You have never been without presence. It is so constant it becomes invisible, like the air you breathe, like the space you move through. The original teachings were pointing toward the most intimate, the most obvious, the most continually present dimension of your experience. The religions that grew from those teachings often made it seem far away, made you feel you needed special qualifications, special permissions, special intermediaries. That was the corruption. The original pointing was always to what was already yours, already present, already the case. The reason this pointing appears in every authentic tradition is that presence has no cultural determination. It belongs to no lineage, no geography, no historical period. Presence is what makes all lineages, geographies, historical periods appear. Any tradition that seriously examines the nature of experience eventually arrives at the same seeing, because there is only one knowing examining itself through apparent many. The implications of this seeing are vast, and they unfold over time rather than all at once. If you are presence, and presence has no personal qualities, then your essential nature was never damaged by life experience. Trauma touched the body, the mind, the personality. Presence itself remained untouched, watching trauma arise and pass like it watches everything arise and pass. Presence is one knowing appearing as many. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke of unity, of oneness, of the dissolution of the boundary between self and world. If you are presence, and presence has no inherent qualities, then you have never been what your thoughts said you were. All the stories about being unworthy, being limited, being fundamentally broken, these were content of presence, objects appearing and disappearing. The one who believed those stories was a creation of thought, an imaginary character that presence mistakenly took itself to be. Realizing this releases lifetimes worth of suffering, through realizing who was never inside the stories in the first place. These implications land over time. Seeing might happen quickly, yet integration takes time. The habits of identification, the momentum of outward attention, the conditioning that has run for decades. Every moment of seeing weakens them. Every return to presence strengthens the new pattern, until eventually what required effort becomes spontaneous, what required practice becomes natural, what required reminder becomes continuous. This is what the traditions called stabilization, or abiding, or making permanent what was glimpsed temporarily. The seeing itself is instant. There is no process to seeing what you already are. The living from that seeing, the embodying of it in daily life, the releasing of every pattern that contradicts it. This unfolds over time. Practice serves here. Tradition serves here. Community serves here. Stabilizing what was glimpsed, allowing it to inform every dimension of living. The world right now is filled with religious conflict, with people certain their tradition has the truth and others have error. What I have shared tonight reveals this conflict as tragedy based on misunderstanding. If every authentic tradition pointed to the same seeing, then fighting over which tradition is correct is fighting over which finger most accurately points at the moon. The fingers differ. The moon does not. All religious teachings are equal, and all paths do lead equally directly to seeing. Some traditions have maintained closer connection to the original pointing. Some have preserved more effective methods. Some have been more corrupted by institutional distortion. Discernment is appropriate, necessary even, for the serious seeker. Discernment directed toward what actually produces seeing, toward what genuinely works when tested through direct experience. The lineages I draw from, the Vajrayana transmission, the Tamil Nadu wisdom, the Kemetic mysteries, the Kashmir Shaivism tradition, these preserve direct pointing more intact than many alternatives. The structures of transmission prioritize direct experience over correct belief, emphasize verification over faith, maintain teacher-student intimacy over mass instruction. The forms serve the function. When forms serve function, they are precious. When forms replace function, they become obstacles dressed as aids. What I am offering through this channel is pointing, again and again, from different angles, through different vocabulary, toward the same seeing that every authentic mystic has always indicated. You are not what you thought you were. You are presence itself. temporarily wearing the costume of personal identity, playing the role of separate self, capable at any moment of realizing the actor behind the role. This realization is the goal that every religion once pointed toward before pointing became building, before seeing became worship, before direct access became institutional gatekeeping. That goal remains available. It is your nature, your condition, what you already and always are. The traditions serve by removing obstacles to seeing what was never hidden. The practices serve by weakening habits that prevent obvious seeing of the obvious. The teachers serve by transmitting quality of being that catalyzes realization. All of it points one direction. All of it points within. If this landed, if something in this pointing touched what recognizes itself in you, share this with someone who is ready for it. Drop a comment about what you are seeing, what is becoming clear, where you want us to go in future transmissions. Subscribe if you have not already, like if this served, and know that every engagement spreads this work to those searching for exactly what you found here tonight. The seeing continues. We continue it together. And together, we become the living evidence that what the ancients knew can be known again now by anyone willing to look where all the fingers have always pointed, within.